When people hear a bold claim about sexual performance, the mind immediately goes hunting for a single lever. One mineral, one pill, one hack. Zinc has become that symbol in the modern conversation, a shorthand for masculinity, testosterone, virility. And to be fair, zinc matters. It plays a real role in hormone production, immune function, and reproductive health. But here's where the story quietly goes wrong. The belief that erections, desire, and sexual confidence can be reduced to a single nutrient. That belief isn't just biologically inaccurate, it's psychologically limiting. An erection is not a switch. It's a conversation, a negotiation between the brain, the nervous system, the vascular system, hormones, and the emotional state of the individual. When we focus obsessively on zinc, or any one factor, we're revealing something deeper about how we want health to work. We want it to be mechanical, linear. Input equals output. Take this, get that. But the human body doesn't operate like a vending machine. It operates more like an ecosystem. Think about what actually has to happen for a strong erection to occur. First, the brain must perceive safety, interest, and presence. Desire doesn't emerge in a vacuum. It emerges when the mind is not flooded with stress, distraction, or low-grade anxiety. Then the nervous system must shift out of fight or flight and into a parasympathetic state, the state of relaxation and receptivity. Only then do blood vessels receive the signal to dilate, allowing blood to flow freely into penile tissue. That process depends heavily on endothelial health, nitric oxide availability, and vascular flexibility. Zinc plays a supporting role at best. It is not the conductor of the orchestra. What's interesting is how often erectile issues are framed as deficiencies rather than signals. We ask, "What am I lacking?" instead of, "What is my body responding to?" Chronic stress, poor sleep, metabolic dysfunction, emotional disconnection, and sedentary living all impair blood flow long before they ever affect testosterone. Yet zinc gets the spotlight because it feels concrete. It feels controllable. You can swallow it. You can measure it. You can point to it and say, "This is the problem." But that narrative, while comforting, keeps people from seeing the larger truth. There's also a philosophical layer here that's worth sitting with. When we reduce male sexual performance to a mineral, we subtly reinforce the idea that masculinity itself is fragile, something that can be lost or restored through external fixes. That creates anxiety. And anxiety is one of the fastest ways to undermine sexual function. The paradox is that the harder someone tries to optimize erections through supplements alone, the more they may be training their mind to associate sex with pressure, monitoring, and self-judgment. That internal surveillance pulls attention away from sensation and presence, which are precisely what the body needs to function well. From a physiological standpoint, zinc does contribute to testosterone synthesis, but testosterone is not the primary driver of erection quality in most men. Blood flow is. Men with normal testosterone can experience severe erectile dysfunction if their vascular health is compromised, while men with lower testosterone can still have strong erections if circulation and nervous system signaling are intact. This is why conditions like insulin resistance, hypertension, and chronic inflammation show up so consistently in erectile dysfunction research. They damage the inner lining of blood vessels, reducing nitric oxide production and impairing the body's ability to relax smooth muscle tissue. No amount of zinc can override that. This is where the conversation needs to mature. Sexual health is not about stacking isolated variables. It's about coherence. The brain, the heart, the blood vessels, and the emotional landscape must be aligned. When they are, performance follows naturally, almost effortlessly. When they're not, the body resists, regardless of how many supplements are thrown at it. Zinc doesn't fail here. It simply gets asked to do a job it was never meant to do alone. There's also a cultural piece we rarely address. Modern life trains the nervous system to stay alert, tense, and forward-leaning. Emails, deadlines, financial pressure, constant stimulation. The body interprets this as a low-level emergency that never quite ends. In that state, blood is prioritized for muscles and the brain, not for reproduction. Erectile difficulty in this context isn't dysfunction, it's adaptation. The body is saying, now is not the time. Ignoring that message and trying to brute force performance through supplementation misses the intelligence of the system. When we widen the lens, we start to see why focusing exclusively on zinc is so unsatisfying. It doesn't address vascular tone. It doesn't improve insulin sensitivity. It doesn't teach the nervous system how to downshift. It doesn't resolve the psychological tension many men carry around performance, aging, or self-worth. And because it doesn't address those deeper layers, it often leads to disappointment, followed by the search for the next miracle compound. This is not an argument against nutrition. It's an argument for nutritional humility. Foods and nutrients work best when they support systems, not fantasies. When we understand that erections are a reflection of overall physiological trust between brain and body, we stop looking for silver bullets and start looking for leverage points that actually matter. Blood flow, endothelial health, nervous system regulation, metabolic resilience. These are not sexy buzzwords, but they are where real change happens. And this is where the conversation naturally opens up to a different category of foods. Ones that don't just boost something abstract, but actively participate in vascular and metabolic health. Foods that support nitric oxide production, reduce oxidative stress, and improve lipid profiles. Foods that work with the body's design rather than trying to override it. When you understand why zinc alone falls short, you're finally ready to understand why certain whole foods quietly outperform isolated supplements. So if there's one idea to carry forward from this, it's this. Sexual performance is not something you extract from the body by force. It's something the body offers when conditions are right. Stop asking what single thing you're missing, and start asking what your system needs to feel safe, supported, and alive. Once you let go of the idea that sexual performance can be rescued by a single isolated mineral, the mind becomes available for a more interesting question. If the body is an ecosystem, what kinds of inputs actually support the conditions for strength, responsiveness, and reliability? This is where the conversation shifts away from supplements and toward foods that operate at a systems level. Not because they're exotic or magical, but because they speak the body's native language. And this is where a humble, often overlooked nut enters the picture. The pistachio. What makes pistachios compelling is not that they boost masculinity in the cartoonish way the internet likes to promise, but that they participate directly in the biology that erections depend on most: vascular function. At the center of this is L-arginine, an amino acid that serves as a precursor to nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is not a trendy molecule. It's a fundamental signaling compound that tells blood vessels to relax. When blood vessels relax, blood flows. When blood flows efficiently and unobstructed, erectile tissue can do what it was designed to do. This is not hype. This is mechanics. But even that description undersells what's happening. Nitric oxide is not just about plumbing. It's about communication. It represents the body's ability to translate desire and intention into physical response. When nitric oxide production is impaired by inflammation, oxidative stress, insulin resistance, or chronic stress, the signal weakens. The desire may still be there, but the body hesitates. Pistachios contribute to this signaling environment not in isolation, but as part of a nutritional pattern that supports endothelial health, the thin inner lining of blood vessels that determines how responsive they are. Beyond L-arginine, pistachios provide a rare combination of healthy fats, antioxidants, potassium, magnesium, and plant compounds that reduce oxidative damage. Oxidative stress is one of the quiet saboteurs of sexual health. It stiffens blood vessels, degrades nitric oxide, and accelerates vascular aging. You don't feel oxidative stress in the moment, but you experience its consequences over time: less flexibility, slower response, diminished resilience. Pistachios help counter this not by overwhelming the system, but by nudging it back toward balance. There's also something psychologically important about this kind of food-based intervention. Eating pistachios doesn't feel like treatment. It doesn't carry the same performance pressure as a pill taken with expectation and anxiety. It integrates into daily life without ceremony. That matters, because the nervous system is exquisitely sensitive to context. When sexual health becomes medicalized and hyper-focused, it can quietly increase self-monitoring. Food, on the other hand, operates in the background. It supports without demanding attention, which allows the mind to stay present rather than evaluative. This is where the philosophical dimension comes in. The body responds best when support is rhythmic rather than urgent. Supplements are often taken reactively, after a problem is noticed, when frustration is already present. Whole foods work prophylactically. They shape the terrain long before performance is tested. Pistachios, eaten regularly, contribute to metabolic health, lipid balance, and glycemic control. These factors are not separate from sexual function. They are foundational to it. Stable blood sugar means less vascular damage. Healthy lipids mean more flexible arteries. Better metabolic health means the body is less inflamed, less defensive, more willing to invest energy in reproduction. There's a tendency to underestimate these slow variables because they don't announce themselves dramatically. No one feels their endothelial function improving in real time. But over weeks and months, the difference becomes apparent, not as a sudden surge, but as consistency. Fewer off days, less variability. A sense that the body responds when called upon, rather than negotiating terms. That reliability is what most people are actually seeking, even if they talk about intensity. Pistachios also offer an interesting lesson in contrast to zinc. Zinc is often consumed in isolation, divorced from food, as if the body were a laboratory bench. Pistachios come packaged with fiber, fats, and micronutrients that modulate absorption and utilization. This slows digestion, stabilizes insulin response, and prevents the metabolic spikes that quietly undermine vascular health. The body evolved to extract meaning from complexity, not from single molecules delivered out of context. Whole foods respect that design. There's even a behavioral layer worth noting. Pistachios tend to be eaten mindfully. They require shelling. They slow consumption. This subtle friction encourages presence, and presence has downstream effects on the nervous system. Eating in a relaxed, attentive state reinforces parasympathetic dominance, the same state required for sexual arousal. This isn't mystical, it's pattern reinforcement. The body learns through repetition what states are safe and familiar. None of this means pistachios are a cure or a shortcut. They don't override poor sleep, chronic stress, or emotional disconnection. But they do something more sustainable. They support the infrastructure. They help restore the conditions under which the body can trust itself. And trust is the invisible currency of sexual function. When blood vessels respond easily, when the nervous system can downshift, when inflammation is low, the body doesn't need to be convinced. It cooperates. This also reframes the idea of harder in a more meaningful way. Strength here isn't about excess tension or forced rigidity. It's about responsiveness. The ability to become firm when appropriate and relaxed when not. That flexibility mirrors psychological health as well. A rigid body often reflects a rigid mind, one locked into performance metrics and outcomes. A responsive body reflects adaptability, presence, and confidence without strain. So when pistachios outperform zinc in this context, it's not because they're more powerful in a narrow sense. It's because they work at the right level of the system. They don't chase hormones directly. They support blood flow, metabolism, and cellular communication. They don't demand belief. They reward consistency. And they don't create dependence. They integrate into a way of living that improves health broadly, not just in one domain. If you understand this, the conversation stops being about a nut and starts being about alignment. When you feed the body in a way that supports circulation, reduces friction, and signals safety, performance becomes a side effect, not a goal. And that may be the most reliable upgrade of all, choosing inputs that make the body willing rather than forcing it to comply.